Hello and welcome to our 7th grade content screencast. Today we will be examining the Korean and Vietnam Wars and the roles that they played in the containment of communism. So let's dive in. It would be impossible in teaching these wars without discussing the Cold War as a whole. I am often asked by my students, what is a Cold War? I have developed a simple definition to help students understand how a Cold War is different from a regular war. A hot war is where one group of people actually fight the other group of people that they have an issue with directly. So for instance, World War II. The Cold War is a little more complex. It's where one group of people do not actually fight the group that they are having a problem with. Instead, they fight through other countries or other means. And in this case, the other countries were Vietnam and Korea. So who was the Cold War actually fought between? The Soviet Union and the United States. The Soviet Union, Russia, became a superpower as well as the United States following World War II. Both countries have nuclear bombs, but they had a lot more during the Cold War. They stockpiled them. Both countries threatened to use them on each other. This was called mutually assured destruction. If one country dropped the bomb, the other country would also drop the bomb. But they never dropped atomic bombs on one another. Instead, they fought each other indirectly through other countries. Those countries being Vietnam and Korea. I like to use the metaphor of a fireman when examining the motivations behind the U.S. involvement in the Cold War. Communism was spreading like wildfire at the end of World War II, and the USA, who hated communism and loved capitalism, saw it as their duty to act as a fireman, putting out all the fires of communism that flared up throughout the world. The first fire that was to provoke an American involvement was the Korean War. The Korean War drove an American involvement because South Koreans did not want communism to spread into their country. Americans fought with the communist North in order to ensure the containment of communism, and is generally thought to have lost. But did they actually lose? Sort of. A ceasefire was called and has remained so ever since. At the 38th parallel, North Korea ends and South Korea begins. Communism was contained in North Korea, but Korea has been divided ever since. Today, the DMZ, where North and South Koreans meet face to face daily, remains on high alert, with little if any contact between the two sides. North Korea has an autocratic communist dictatorship, and South Korea has a democracy. While not covered in our standards, there is also the Cuban Revolution that takes place during this decade, which you may want to reference when teaching this unit, as your students will have examined it the previous year. The second fire that we are going to discuss in the 7th grade is the Vietnam War. Communism was spreading into Vietnam, and the United States sent troops to help the South Vietnamese who did not want communism in their country. And the USA lost again. I have this question mark here because, as my own father is a Vietnam vet, and I have discussed the Vietnam War with several other Vietnam vets, the idea that the United States lost is somewhat debatable in the fact that they just retreated and left. So be sensitive to your students when discussing the conclusion of the Vietnam War. I would also like to point out that there is a new Ken Burns documentary on the Vietnam War that is a must-see for teachers. It details the efforts of Vietnam's leader, Ho Chi Minh, efforts to connect diplomatically with the United States before the war broke out, and how the relationship deteriorated due to America's stance on backing France's colonial holdings, which was Vietnam. So as France moved out, the USA took on greater efforts to contain communism, which Ho Chi Minh was in support of. The United States went on to enter war with the North Vietnamese. The result is that Vietnam became a communist, aka socialist country. But it should be noted that there's remarkable differences between communism found in North Korea and Vietnam. Vietnam is drastically less economic restrictions than North Korea, and you can travel there very freely. Just a few suggestions for teaching this content in your 7th grade with your 7th grade students. Dr. Seuss's Butter Battle book explores the Cold War as a whole and could be a great way to begin this unit. Because, as these events are not too far in the past, there are a lot of primary resources that you can tie into the Butter Battle book and use with your students. Additionally, look at specific examples of political cartoons, Vietnam War era songs. I would have students listen to these songs as well as read them and analyze them. And look to see if maybe your students can interview one of their family members. Many families are going to have Vietnam War veterans that are still alive that they could interview and have, a personal connection to this war, which is not too far in the past. And maybe even find a Korean War veteran as well. I would like to take this time to say thank you for joining us in this screencast, and tell you that all the resources shared with you are available on Digital and Wiki Commons. And I hope that you have an excellent school year, and thank you again for watching.